And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winnick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage, and you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. My guest today is Monique Maley, who's the president and founder of Articulate Persuasion. I was reading through her bio earlier, and piece that stuck out with me because it's interesting to me is she describes herself as bilingual and bicultural, which is interesting. She's an experienced sought-after consultant, coach, and speaker. She's worked for more than 15 years in theater and film in the US and in London. And here we are. So welcome aboard, my bicultural friend.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Yes, I am bicultural. I think that I've always called myself that, but now it's something that people ask about because before it was slightly dismissed. So it's nice. But yes, I grew up in a very unusual household with a father who was born and raised in Texas, but was not like any other Texan I've ever met, but a mother who was born in Spain and raised in Mexico. And then I was raised in Mexico and in Houston. So, and even in Mexico, I was surrounded by Spaniards. So I say that I am half Spanish refugee in Mexico, half non-Texan Texan of Irish descent.
So never fitting in anywhere, and therefore needing to acclimate, understand, read the tea leaves, and all those sort of other things.
Yeah, actually, it's exactly what it is. I mean, I'll be really honest. I don't ever remember a time where I didn't feel I fit in. But I think at a really young age, I became very aware of like, who am I with, and how do I bring that part of myself to this conversation? So not dismissing ever any part of who I was, trying to hide it, trying to dismiss it or trying to be less the way I am.
Right.
But bringing whatever qualities or style or conversation, right, is really going to resonate with the people that I'm with. So I never made myself an other. And so that helped other people not see me as another. Now it helped that I didn't look like this, blend of things, but that's a whole other conversation for a different podcast.
Sure. So I want to stay on that fit in piece though, because I can tell you that from my experience, I don't know if people always use those words, but it's probably thematically where it would fall. Lots of my clients and friends and colleagues that are thought leaders didn't fit in, right? So they might have had an esteemed career at a big consultancy or a Fortune 50, but they always felt like, even though I, from the outside, it looks like I'm killing it here. I'm getting the promotions, getting the raises, more responsibility. This isn't what I want. Or I'm an academic as a thought leader, but I'm an oddball of an academic because I actually care about things that are real versus the theoretical, the abstract. Or, I'm a business person, but I care more about leadership and people. So I think there's this, maybe it's not sense of other or sense of not fitting in that is a commonality across thought leaders. And then, then it's like, well, the only answer is to do your own thing, right?
I think actually, it's so funny because I really dig into this in the book in one chapter around that word fit. And it's such a weird word. I mean, what is fit really? I think we are all, if we are comfortable with who we are authentically, and I write a whole chapter on the authenticity. And I know you've had people on who talk about it because when thought leadership, it is the foundation of all successful thought leadership. But if you really know who you are and you're comfortable in that skin, there are always going to be times where you feel like you're more with your people than you're not, or you're leveraging your skill set in a way that really resonates for you, or you don't. And so I think it's less about not fitting in, because I think nobody fits in. I think everybody fakes the fit, right? I think we say, this is where I bring my highest value. This is the work that I do really well, but that also serves me. And I was really lucky, first of all, that I started in a career professionally in theater as an actor really young, that really, it was a career that suited me. The lifestyle suited me. And I didn't realize until I started working with larger organizations what that was, because for me, I realized if I start a new gig 6 months in, I'm bored. Like once I've set up my systems and while I've got all my connections and and it's sort of now just ticking along, the minute starts to tick along, I'm bored and I want to be out of there. And that's what actors do, right? You go, you do a play, you rehearse, it opens, it's open for 3 months, 6 months, and then you move on to the next thing and it's new people and a new script and a new director. The same is with work for me. What I love about the work that I do now is that every day is different. Every client is different, even though the challenges they're having are much the same. the way to approach it, the way to work with them is always different. And so once I
Sure.
figured out that's where my, what they call zone of genius or highest value or whatever you want to call that, then I felt like I was comfortable in my own skin because I was kind of turning myself into a pretzel trying to make my value work somewhere else.
As the outsider in that scenario, and I think we're all outsiders as consultants and advisors and such, you're
Vendors.
also not subject. What's that?
Some people call us vendors. Like they don't invite us to events because we're vendors. That's my favorite.
Is there a less warm term than vendor?
It's the most insulting term I've ever heard. But there are people that.
Well, the three most offensive letters are RFP, but that's a whole nother
that's true
question that we won't get into. But I think the positive side of being a vendor on the low end of the totem pole is you're not subject to the politics, right? So you come in as sort of it's almost an anthropological. You come in and they're hiring you to solve this problem, and you look around and you go, well, this is pretty obvious. The gorillas are throwing feces at each other. Why is nobody talking about this? You say,
why isn't it?
You notice that? Like the gorillas are throwing feces, and they're like, wow, brilliant insight. And you're like, not so much. It was fairly obvious, but the fact that you can call it, right, and you can see it, and you can be, you don't need to be insensitive, but a little bit more direct and blunt because you're not worried about, next June you're going to get a 2% raise or a 4% raise because you're on to the next thing by next year.
Absolutely. And going back to the authenticity piece, like I am very honest and direct. That's what makes me good at my job now. I am not aggressive. I am not offensive, but I am not a bullshitter. That was my hardest thing when I moved from theater to film. A bit of the schmoozy thing, like that was just never me. Now, granted, there were enough business people there who appreciated my directness that it was okay. But I think that absolutely that's why being a coach and a consultant is so much more suited to who I am and being able to bring myself to the conversation. Because
you're part, but you're not really part. So it's similar to...
I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to sit there and watch people, butt heads when I'm going, hey guys, right, these monkeys are throwing the feces. I think that's probably part of the problem. But yeah, when you're in large organizations, if you don't have great leadership that allows for those voices at all levels to contribute, then then you're going to feel like you're not in the right place, and you're going to have to figure out either a way to be okay with that or a way to get out.
Yep. So I want to go in a little bit of a different direction for a moment or two, Monique. So, your background, theater, film, etc. Interesting in that lots of, when I start to think about sort of my work and authors and thought leaders and such that I work with, if you sort of heat map what they've done in previous worlds, there's some obvious things, consultants, academics, whatever. And then once you get to know a lot of folks, there's a lot of folks that did improv, a lot of folks that did magic or still do, or comedy, or, they're in a rock band on the side, or they're a frustrated musician from back in the day or whatever. And those performance chops, those performance skills, whether it's, controlling the, executive presence or the way to master the art of influence, play really well in this space. And I also think it's another stage, if you will, another
Absolutely.
format. So could play with that for a little bit.
There are so many things. I use my actor's toolkit every day, but I think most directly to what you're talking about, I think performers are comfortable with visibility. Right. And you cannot be a thought leader if you are not comfortable being visible. If you are not comfortable with having some of the spotlight on you, you can just keep trying at it, but it's never going to generate the ROI for you that you would want in thought leadership if you are not comfortable being visible.
If you're enjoying this episode of Leveraging Thought Leadership, please make sure to subscribe. If you'd like to help spread the word about our podcast, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. We're available on Apple Podcast and on all major listening apps, as well as at thoughtleadershipleverage.com/podcasts.
I agree with that. So I can think of, so I'll go back almost 20 years. So when Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point came out, I, like millions of others, said, wow, this is awesome. Like what an amazing book. Got me to think differently. Hadn't seen this before, etc. And then I was invited to see him speak somewhere here in New York. And I saw him speak and I was so bummed out and disappointed. He was god awful. And I was thinking about it on the drive home going, oh my God, this guy wrote this book that just all I could talk about for like weeks was this book. And I bought copies to give to friends and whatever. And then he went to bring it to life, and it was like reading, the
Yeah.
manual for a VCR. And I said, well, of course he would be that. Like, let's think about where his life was before. Introvert, right?
Yeah.
Writer. He probably spent his days living in, fluorescent, small cubes somewhere, pounding out thoughts. And now all of a sudden the spotlight's thrust on him, and we're expecting something else. And then I was
If
fortunate
you
enough
go
to
see him now, he's completely different.
amazing. Well, that's
Right.
what I was going to say is I saw him 6 months later, and I was like, holy crap, he got a lot of work done.
Yeah.
He's kind of elfin. He's comfortable in his space. He was totally a different game. So I guess my point to you is many, many thought leaders are really good at the thought part, but the stage presence that, I don't want, I'm more of an introvert, for if you want to just put a label on it. I don't like the attention. I'm always fine being in the corner doing my thing. I was referring to those that have both, but what would you recommend to let's call them the shy thought leader that needs to put themselves out?
Well, and I would add almost a third category to that, because it's not, yes, there are the ones who really are very comfortable working in a room by themselves. I am not. Sitting in front of the computer all day. I am not, right? That is just not who I am. I was not like that at 2. So I'm not going to be like that now. But the third category is the ones who have sort of been told over the years to not boast, not this, not that.
So it's cultural, some of it.
Right. The tooting your own horn, oh my gosh, I can't put, it's not about me and that whole thing. And I'm not going to lie, that's always sometimes with me. There are people out there who it's all about them. And I have very little patience, because I don't feel like they're there to serve their audience, whatever that audience may be.
But there's a line between healthy ego and ridiculous narcissist.
Absolutely. And I think we need to, when I'm working with someone, I have to figure out, okay, what are their motivators and what are their demotivators? What are the obstacles that they're putting in their own way to get there?
Yeah.
But I definitely think that the performance thing, the being comfortable in the limelight, is for those people who are not comfortable in the limelight. There's that one. How do we get there? So you can be standing on the spotlight by yourself and be okay with that. But on the other hand, if it's not your wheelhouse, this performance part, how can you leverage whatever it is that you have and show up in a way that's really authentic for you? And so years ago, so I started this business about 12, almost 12 years ago. And in those days, everybody was writing articles and books about how to present like Steve Jobs. And I said, do not present like Steve Jobs. That works for him. Because if I were to stand there in a black turtleneck and sneakers and never make eye contact and be up high on a stage, I would not get the same engagement, persuasion that he did, which he built over time. Because if you watch early presentations, he was not there either, right? He found the way to make it work for him, his style, his leadership style. And that's where we have to go. The minute we start trying to be like anybody else, we're going to fail at this part of the equation. Thought leadership at its core has to be about being able to be trusted. And if you're not authentic.
Well, no, I agree with that. I remember a long time ago when, was it AOL bought Time Warner or Time Warner bought AOL, whatever?
Time Warner bought AOL, yeah.
Right. So Time Warner bought AOL.
Well,
Jerry Levin.
We're going to date ourselves with that one, Peter.
We're going to definitely date ourselves, right? But so Jerry Levin was the media side of it. He's the Time Warner side of it. Steve Case is the cool, relatively speaking, dorky AOL guy. And they show up for the press conference to announce it, right? And Jerry Levin shows up in khakis and without a tie. And Case shows up in a suit, dressed like, and it looks like they wore each other's outfits. And there was a lack of coordination on the back end.
Right.
They were, I think it was more about being respectful, but it wound up coming across as so inauthentic. Like, again, this is late 90s. 60-year-old executives weren't showing up in khakis, and the cool techie dude wasn't wearing a shirt and tie. And you just saw the look of that footage, and it really probably was a pretty good precursor to the reasons that that deal could work out so swimmingly well.
That is so interesting, because in authenticity, right? When somebody is looking at you, when you are visible and someone sees you, why they get that little mojo about why you're not authentic, it could be because you're in a suit and you never wear suits and you don't feel comfortable in your own skin. It could also be that what you're saying, you don't believe. But the audience doesn't know why you're inauthentic. All they know is that you are inauthentic. So it really doesn't matter that it's just your shoes are too tight, right? It's going to have the same effect than if you didn't believe what you're trying to, the information you're trying to share.
And right now in the, I don't know, COVID, post-COVID, wherever we are 18 months into this thing, I think there has been what I would call forced authenticity. So when everybody, I mean, I've been using Zoom for a long time, but when everybody sort of first came on Zoom in mass, there's almost a little too much authenticity, like maybe clean your laundry up, maybe like we didn't know what
make your bed.
Make your bed would be nice, right? Like, but people, and people didn't know. Now people have had the time to say, well, what am I projecting here? If it's not, it used to be a big deal for a professional man to have a shoe shine, right? Well, nobody even knows if you're wearing pants anymore for, when you're sitting on.
But we want to pretend like you are. We want to imagine that you are wearing pants.
Yes,
but I know what you mean.
Particularly in my case, yes. But what I'm saying is, so, the things that we used to do to present ourselves as, quote, professional, to give signals or signs or whatever, are different. And I think this authenticity piece, everybody's relaxed a little bit, but your version of relaxed might be different than mine. I'm in my home office. I love it. I mean, this is where I live, right? Like we're shooting this on video and recruiting the audio. I'm surrounded by books. I'm a book guy. Like you're in my home, right? It's my home office. You're chilling in a nice comfy chair, and I can see the paintings in the background, and it seems like you're presenting a sense of you. It's not this stiff, artificial. Nobody's born in a cubicle, right?
Well, but I think that has to do. I mean, if marketing people understand brand identity, and if you're going to be a thought leader, you have a brand identity, and so everywhere you show up, every way you show up, whether it's what your background is when you're on Zoom, or how you dress when you walk in the room, or how you engage with people. I always, a real telltale sign for me when I used to do a lot of, back in the olden days when there used to be live speaking, and I would go to a lot of conferences and give keynotes.
We officially call them the olden days now? Is that the
I do. They feel very old, like they're so far away. I can hardly imagine.
Or the before time? Exactly.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to those coming back at some point. But, I would see other speakers and watching how they engage with, say, the company that's hosting the event versus how they talk to the AV guy. Right. That is an indicator of an individual and how you show up being authentic with everybody, because consistency is so important, because inconsistency can kill all that credibility.
Yeah. And by the way, the AV guy always comes back to the client at the end and said, oh, that one speaker that you had, what a jerk. What a condescending, blah, 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 blah.
You work in the film business, and one of the first things, I think it's important. There's so many horrible jobs on the set. So I think it's important to be good friends with the whole crew, but
sure,
you want to be great friends with sound and lighting, because you can give the performance of your life. And if there's bad sound and there's bad lighting, you end up looking bad, right? So it is that whole, you have to be that, whoever you are, you need to be that all the time. Yep. And there are even people whose authentic selves are kind of, can I say asshole here, right? They're asshole guys.
Well, I was going to ask, what if being your authentic self, you're a jerk?
Well, there are people who nobody is ever going to want to sit down and have a warm, fuzzy conversation with Elon Musk. Let's be honest.
Well,
that's not his brand. That's not who he is. That's not the jam. So, you got to own who you are. Obviously never treat people poorly. That's a whole other conversation for another day. But if you want people to trust you, they have to feel like they know who you are.
Yeah. Well, you have to let them in.
And also when we're in that state, just even physically in that state, we're going to share our best advice, our best knowledge, because we are comfortable with ourselves. And that's when we can bring the most value to whoever we're talking about.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a great point. So this has been fun, Monique. Thank you for sharing your time and your story.
Absolutely.
And feces throwing gorillas, and some graphics we can create for this one. But
we're going to lose people in the first 30 seconds, but there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, thank you for sharing your story with us. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.